Well. Clemson Tiger fans, college football fans, welcome back to another episode of the All In Show right here on Clemson at the Voice of College Football. Thank you so much for joining me. We got a jam-packed show for you guys tonight. Going to talk a little recruiting, offensive line, some 2026 offers that have gone out and some offers that have yet to go out, but offers that we expect to go out. Talk the junior day that is approaching here on March 8th. And then we're going to talk some new coaching hires, some additions that Dabo Swinney has quietly made here in the depths of the offseason that I think are super important to the program and just some stuff that we need to talk about. So all of that coming up and more in tonight's episode. But before we get into that, if you are not subscribed to the channel, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button for us. It would really help us out. We're on the road to 6,000 subscribers, getting closer and closer every day. Hope you guys will help us out with that. That'll be greatly appreciated. Make sure you like this video, especially these live videos. That helps us out. Share the video, push it out to all your friends. And then last but certainly not least, we got the Super Chat feature available. As you guys know, at the end of every show, when we get through our planned portion of topics that we will discuss tonight, we will turn it over to you guys, the comment section, and let you guys drive the rest of the show. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, stick around to the end of the show. Be sure to hit that Super Chat feature so that your comment and or question attached to that gets read and responded to during this live episode. And with all of that said, and without further ado, I'm going to bring on my co-host, Jordan Boatman. What's up, brother? How you doing tonight?
Good, man. Kind of over this weather.
Yeah.
That's probably the only thing that's been souring my week. It was like high 60s, low 70s like a few days ago, and now it's 39, 40 degrees and raining all day. You got to love North Carolina weather, as you and I are both very familiar.
Man, I'm trying to tell you, the swings between the mid to high 70s and the mid to high 30s is, I could do without that. It's getting a little much. It's been raining where I'm at for 2 days straight, basically at this point. So, the weather has been less than stellar in our neck of the woods anyways. So hopefully it's better for those out there in the live chat.
Yeah, hopefully. Although it was a very, rainy and kind of gloomy day, really the past couple of days in North Carolina for more reasons than one. As there's not a lot of happy Duke and Carolina fans right now.
Not at all. Clemson, shout out to Clemson basketball. They put in some work this past week and pretty much dominated the entire state of North Carolina.
Yes, they did. They swept Tobacco. I think that's the second time they've done it without losing, beating all four Tobacco Road schools. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, while it was rainy and cold the past couple of days here, I mean, it was a pretty awesome week for Clemson football in terms of the program, and we're going to talk about it. A few really exciting hires that I'm really excited to kind of break down. They're not guys that it's not position coaches or
right.
Major on-field staff hires, but Clemson made 3 really significant hires that are going to pay a huge dividends from a recruiting and game planning and player development standpoint, and a roster management and talent acquisition standpoint. So, we've talked about it, how much Clemson has won the offseason so far in terms of just the ability to retain, all of the starters that you had remaining eligibility, the staff hires you made, the dedication to NIL and the ability to go into the transfer portal to land positions of need, which is something we've been talking about for a while. All of that is just, it kind of sums up, that I think Dabo and this coaching staff really feels like this year is going to be special, and they're putting all their chips in, they're pushing all their chips on the table, and they are ready to compete in 2025, not just to win the ACC and make the playoff again, but be a legitimate national title contender. So I'm really excited, and this week really kind of got me pumped up, and you can kind of feel the rejuvenation in the fan base. You can kind of see it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Like, a lot has been going good for Clemson, as you mentioned. The basketball team is playing extremely well. Couldn't be more proud of those guys. I mean, obviously dropping that game to Georgia Tech early on in the week was less than ideal. Did not play well in that game at all. And frankly, had way too many opportunities at the end to close it out and eke out a win there, and just didn't get the job done. So no excuse there, but you turn right around and you basically dominated Duke inside the paint all night. And it was a close game. It was back and forth. I can't even count how many lead changes there were, but it was a fun game to watch, and Clemson pulls it out in the end and then turns around and dominates North Carolina from start to finish. So shout out Clemson basketball. Hopefully they continue to play well and maybe make a little run into the NCAA tournament and see what they can do there. But yeah, from the football side of things, it has been a very eventful offseason for the Clemson Tigers, oddly enough, because Clemson typically is a more quiet program in the offseason. You don't hear a whole lot of breaking news or stories coming out of Clemson football in the offseason, at least until spring practice ramps up. And then, you're always looking to hear what you can about the young guys and how they're performing, and, how those high school guys are meshing in with the team and stuff like that. But Dabo's been putting in work this offseason, man. And the coaching staff is starting to look a whole lot different. You're starting to see a front office, if you will, get constructed within the Clemson program, which just tells you how different of a world we live in college football. The fact that you have universities out here basically constructing an NFL-style front office to manage rosters, because that's just how complicated and daunting the task has become in college football when it comes to managing your roster from year to year, from fall to spring, from spring to summer, from summer to fall. It's just every season you're just kind of trying to hold on to the guys that you have on campus and then trying to figure out what you need to add in order to compete at the highest level. So Clemson's made some of those changes, and we're going to get into that, but lots to talk about, man. It's going to be a really fun show. But before we get into it, let's give a quick shout out to our comments section, all of our great people here who come and support each and every week. Tiggs getting in with the first comment of the night. Also one of our moderators. Thank you so much, Tiggs, for being in here. He said 13-0, let's go. I can get behind that, brother.
I can get behind that.
I can get behind that. John Sarian in here, another one of our moderators and one of our OGs to the channel. Thank you so much for being here. Droid132 is in here. NC Vance. Adam is in here. Robert is in here. Let's see. I think I hit Intelligent Savage. Thank you for stopping by. One of our frequent guests in the comment section. Michael Foster in here. Thank you guys so much for being in here. Be sure. We got 20 people in the live chat right now. Hit that like button for us. Get us as close to that 20 number as possible while we get into these topics tonight, Jordan. And I guess without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into the show and let's get this stuff started. First thing we want to talk about tonight, guys, is these staff hires. Dabo Swinney and Clemson as a whole, as a football program, as you mentioned earlier, Jordan, has really won the offseason. Dabo has been making moves left and right, starting with letting go of Wes Goodwin as defensive coordinator, bringing in Tom Allen from Penn State, a big-time hire, a seasoned guy, a guy that has been at the head coaching level, at the Power 5 level, and had a lot of success and has a long track record of putting very high-level defenses on the field. So it starts with that kind of in this offseason, but it has not ended there. Dabo Swinney continued to add continually adding to his head coaching staff, bringing on a lot more experience and bringing on different type of guys. You think about a guy like Mike Houston, that just got brought on as a defensive analyst that's going to kind of assist Tom Allen on that defensive side of the ball and constructing this new version of the Clemson defense that will be the 2025 Clemson defense. And he comes in touting a 106-62 head coaching record overall. Spent a lot of time at the FCS level, spent some time at the FBS level at ECU, spent 6 seasons there, won a national championship with JMU. So he's a very experienced guy, very good defensive mind. What are your thoughts on Clemson adding Mike Houston and what that means for Clemson going forward as a football program? And how big is this, that Dabo continues to add guys that are very seasoned and really know what they're doing and are experts in their craft?
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing Dabo take advantage of the new rules with regards to staff, and that's something that we talked about when that was announced. Was something that we felt like Clemson and Dabo was uniquely positioned to take advantage of, because there are a lot of coaches that want to come to Clemson. Like that's something we've talked about. I mean, it's which is why we were kind of frustrated, at times with the internal promotions, and some of them worked out, some of them didn't. Obviously, and the more recent ones kind of cost you in some recent years. But I say that to say that Dabo really, really wanted to make sure that this defense was special.
Mm-hmm.
With everything you have coming back on the defensive line, everything that you bring back at linebacker and in the secondary, like this was, and with all the struggles that you had this past season, I think Dabo knew that, increasing the quality of the brain trust that you have on your defensive staff was only going to be a positive. And to get a guy like Mike Houston, who was just, recently let go from ECU after, he kind of turned that program around a little bit. They were kind of in a bad way when he got there. I think he left that program in a better spot than he left it. Had a couple of 8-win seasons there, some bowl wins, more success than a lot of coaches have had there in quite some time.
Yeah, tough place to coach. I mean,
it is. It is. It's not. It's not the days of CJ2K and
no.
Those teams anymore. And so he really did I thought he did a pretty admirable job, and it kind of tailed off at the end. But you already mentioned his success at at the FCS and D2 level at Lenoir Ryan. So like he was a very, very. He's been in the coaching world a long time, one of the more respected minds in college football, and to add him to the staff in an unpaid position, I should say, as well. I mean, I think that's massive, and so it only helps the defense. With Tom Allen being, he's going to be more of a CEO of the defense. He's going to oversee a lot of things. He's not going to be so much hands-on with the position coaches. I think it helps a ton from game planning to scouting. It just makes that that job a lot easier, and him giving his own input as a respected defensive mind himself. I mean, it's only going to help. So I think it's a really, really big time move. And maybe, who knows, Clemson could be, and Dabo could kind of be what Nick Saban was to a lot of coaches.
Dabo got here starting his own coaching rehabilitation program.
Yeah. So
Saban retired. He must have called Dabo up and been like, "Hey man, you gotta carry the torch for the coaching rehabilitation program."
and the good thing is we've talked about it. I mean, Dabo's a fun coach to work for, compared to a lot of other coaches, just because he does emphasize the work-life balance, and we've talked about, and why Clemson is such an attractive place for assistants. Clemson was is kind of in a unique advantage to kind of do that, because they have the backing and support. And the sport. a lot of coaches want to come work for him, and and kind of see how he runs a program.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's I think Clemson was uniquely positioned to do that. And yeah, Mike Houston is a big time hire.
Yeah, absolutely. A huge hire. I think it's going to be a pivotal point for the defense to just have another great defensive mind in there to just take another look at schemes and adjustments and things that could help this defense adjust within a game, which is something that we struggled with immensely last year. We could not adjust. We kind of rolled out there with the game plan that we had, and that was what it was for that game. And there was very little, if at all, any adjustments during last season when it came to Wes Goodwin being at the helm. So you would think with Tom Allen and some of the guys that Dabo is putting around him to take some of the load off of him and help him out with things that he's going to need help with. It's going to be huge, because you can have a guy like Mike Houston scout 2-3 games ahead, right, and start preparing things so that Tom Allen's not starting fresh after a Saturday game against, let's say, FSU, and you got a game Friday night against Louisville. A guy like Mike Houston can get a big head start for the defense when it comes to scouting that and putting a tentative game plan together, or at least things for Tom Allen to look at, right? So I think that's key, and that's what will be important going forward. Obviously, he comes with his, a lot of success as a head coach, a lot of success on the defensive side of the ball. But another guy that Dabo brought along, Lonnie Galloway, most recently at UNC, brought him on as an offensive analyst. So he'll be doing the same type of thing that Mike Houston is doing for the defense. He'll be doing on the offensive side, kind of assisting Garrett Riley, being that offensive analyst, the guy that can look 2-3 games ahead, try to scout trends, try to look at tendencies that Clemson is doing to try to mix it up and continually confuse defenses. Obviously, had stints at Wake Forest and Louisville. Your thoughts on Dabo's addition to this offensive staff and bringing on Lonnie Galloway for the 25 season as an offensive analyst?
Yeah, Lonnie Galloway, if you are, familiar with the North Carolina high school, recruiting circles, I mean, he's a guy that everybody knows. He is a face that everybody knows. He was at North Carolina, obviously, most recently as their wide receivers coach. He's a guy that has a lot of connections in the state. And so, not only is he going to add to the offensive brain trust, like you mentioned, like has the recruiting connections that I think are going to be important for Clemson in these next coming cycles, because especially in the Charlotte area where, Clemson was known to kind of go and get whoever they want. But in recent years, you've had programs, North Carolina has kind of gotten back into it. But really the biggest threat in recent years in the Charlotte area has been Tennessee. Tennessee has gone in and won a few recruiting battles for some big time prospects in Charlotte. And so Lonnie Galloway has a lot of connections in the area. He has a son at Providence Day who is a defensive end for next recruiting class. So, I think from a recruiting standpoint, I think honestly that might be his biggest addition to the program, because he's a guy that everybody is familiar with within North Carolina, and Clemson certainly is trying to kind of get their foothold back in that state, because it's kind of waned in the recent years. And so it's a big deal. And he's also going to help coach up the wide receivers and assist with Tyler Grisham. And he's a guy that has a really, really good background and track record with wide receivers, recruiting them and development. So another big time hire, except on the offensive side, that I think is going to pay some dividends, underrated dividends for Clemson.
Yeah, you can certainly see the recruiting aspect being a big part of why Dabo Swinney decided to bring him on, but he'll certainly add some to the on the field product as well, as far as game planning and helping to coach those wide receivers. And to your point earlier, you're really starting to see how big of a rule change it was with the coaching staffs and the NCAA, and that the rule change that happened and how it's just expanded. And Dabo's certainly taking advantage of that by bringing on Mike Houston and Lonnie Galloway. And those guys are going to contribute in a big way, I think, in 2025. You can kind of see, as you mentioned before, Clemson kind of pushing all their chips to the center of the table for 2025. Not that it's a national championship or bust season. I'm not there yet. I'm not, I'm not saying Clemson's going to win a national championship in 2025, but you can certainly see the urgency from Dabo Swinney, this coaching staff, bringing on the extra experience to try to make this defensive transition as seamless as possible and to try to interject even more life into that offense, because 2025 is going to be a big year for Clemson. We lose a ton of talent after this season, so you really want to capitalize on it while it's here. And you can certainly see Dabo with a sense of urgency heading into the 2025 season. But he did not end there, Jordan. As you know, and as everybody else who is listening to this knows, college football has changed a ton in the past, 4, 5, 6 seasons. You have NIL that is a whole new animal in college football, and that in conjunction with the transfer portal has really made rosters very difficult to manage for college coaches, because essentially 2-3 times a year you have free agency in college football. At the end of the season in December, a window opens. And there's mass exodus from a lot of teams. There's teams out here that had to forego their bowl games because they couldn't field a team because they were so riddled by the transfer portal, right? And then immediately after this spring season that we're about to go through, there will be another transfer portal season that will open up for a week or so, and there will be a mass exodus from a lot of teams. There will be a lot of guys that enter the transfer portal because they don't like where they ended up on a depth chart, which is fine. But it makes it very difficult to construct a roster and really be able to project where you're going to be come fall, right? So with that said, and with all those new challenges, you have started to see a lot of college football programs, especially your major college football programs, start to construct what I would call, a front office, similar to an NFL team that has a front office that kind of deals with player personnel and scouting and player acquisition and contracts. And you think about this house settlement that's coming up that we assume is going to hit in July, and that's going to bring a whole new slew of good things, but it'll bring challenges with it because you're going to have to figure out how to use this $20+ million and how you're going to divvy it up amongst your team. And when you think about that, all that landing at the feet of just one guy, a head coach, is too much to ask of one person. So Jordan Sorrells has been on the staff for a little while. He helped out with roster construction and management this year, but Dabo brings in a new guy to kind of help with this, and he's going to be the director of player evaluation and acquisition, Kevin Kelly, most recently of the Los Angeles Chargers, front office guy, scouting guy, 20+ years of experience scouting college players. What does this mean for Clemson's program going forward? What kind of role do you think he plays? And, what do you envision him actually doing for Clemson football when it comes to that evaluating and acquisition piece?
Yeah, you mentioned it. Jordan Sorrells has been kind of the general manager of the program. This past season, that was kind of his new title. But yeah, I believe Kevin Kelly is coming in and he's going to work alongside him. And, I think Kevin's job is, of course, he's going to be, it's in the name, player evaluation and scouting. I think he's definitely going to have a big hand in that. But I also think he's going to be one of those guys that is involved with, NIL and kind of, not facilitating those deals. So you can't, technically not allowed to do that. But he will have a hand in and have a close working relationship with the 110 Society and kind of, identifying guys and kind of making sure that they will be, properly, compensated and all of that. when it comes to their recruitment and ultimately signing them. So I think he's going to have a very multifaceted group of responsibilities because he's going to be involved in so much from a player scouting standpoint, but also a player compensation and NIL standpoint. And I think he's also going to have a hand in identifying guys in the transfer portal.
Yep.
So, I think that is going to be another massive part of his job as well. So, he's going to be a guy that kind of takes a lot of, stuff off of Jordan's plate. Great name, by the way. I think that's, it's massive, and it looks more like a pro model. And I think you're seeing more and more teams starting to move to that, getting guys from the NFL who have a lot of experience dealing with the player compensation and the scouting aspect of, acquiring talent. And so that's just kind of what college football is now. And you're seeing Clemson kind of modernize in that respect as well. So it's a big deal. He's a guy, like you mentioned, he spent the last 10 years with the Chargers. So a guy that is really dedicated to his craft and, 20 plus years of experience overall. I think it's a big time hire for Clemson. And it's not one of those that, is going to make national headlines, it's not going to stay in national headlines. People are going to forget about it. But I think it's a very, very important, position to have in your basically your front office now because of all the changes that have happened and that will happen when it comes to revenue sharing coming up soon. It's just going to make everything a lot different, and it's going to be more pro style in nature. And so having a guy that has that experience, it's a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a huge job. It's a daunting task that I think he's going to be a part of, along with Jordan Soros on the team. But it's going to be a very necessary job because you mentioned when that house settlement comes down and the revenue sharing does officially kick in for college football and college sports in general, you're going to have guys. Dabo Swinney can't sit there and evaluate the financials of every single player and what they deserve as far as the revenue sharing goes. You got to leave that to what we're talking about, this front office, right? Those guys have to individually look at all the players and be like, this is their piece of the pie that they deserve based off of whatever factors that Clemson deems important. And this is what we're going to pay them when it comes to the rev sharing. Because you're not just going to blanket pay everybody. Oh, how many players do we got? Divide it up. That's not how you're going to do it. That's not realistic. It's going to be based off of, how important you are to you, this football team. How are you performing? So on and so forth. And I'm sure they'll have their criteria. But it's good to see that there is this, what you mentioned, modernization of Clemson football and building this front office. And because there's too much going on in college football for the on-the-field coaches to take care of all of this stuff. You have to have guys that are removed from on-the-field stuff, task and all that stuff to really deal with this kind of stuff and be able to allow your program to run seamlessly and at the highest level of college football. That's really what you need to do. And last question on these coaching hires, Jordan. Obviously, Clemson's been in the media quite a bit, been talked about because of Dabo Swinney's additions with, not only the defensive and offensive analysts, but also Kevin Kelly as a front office guy and just the, addition of Tom Allen, all this stuff. Does any of this stuff, a lot of the media out there, are sort of surprised and they're like, oh, Dabo's finally, broke into modern college football and he's making Clemson a modern program and he's finally delving into the transfer portal and he's bringing in new blood in the coaching staff. Does any of this stuff surprise you, or what is your overall thoughts on all these changes and all this news that has come out of Clemson football since the clocks hit zero versus Texas in the college football playoff a month and a half ago, whatever it is?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have seen the narrative in the media with all this news that, oh my gosh, Dabo is finally, he's finally changed and, he's done a full 180 on everything that he's talked about, and
Right.
I think that's obviously a little bit overstated. If you're a person that has followed this program over the last couple of seasons, I think you've seen it hasn't been overnight, and I think that's probably why people have just not been paying attention. But you have seen Dabo and this program slowly start to change how they do things, and it just they didn't just tear it all up and restart everything. It was a gradual process, whether it was the rebuilding of this coaching staff, where you were one of the least experienced programs in the Power Five, especially among your peers or who you consider peers, to now one of the more experienced coaching staffs in the country, because it wasn't we cleaned house one year and brought in a bunch of new guys. It was, okay, this guy didn't work out, we're going to let him go. We're going to retain this guy, and we're going to see what happens. Okay, this guy didn't work out next season, we're going to let him go. And so that you saw that happening, and then you also saw the evolution of Clemson's NIL apparatus, obviously from having two collectives to the consolidation into one, and the increase in funding over the last couple of seasons. Like, all of these things were things that, were slowly being changed. And not to mention the, Dabo taking, dips into the transfer portal in previous cycles, not being successful, but taking dips into the transfer portal. He was trying.
Right.
And so now, with this offseason and, everything kind of coming together at once, people have kind of viewed it as a 180 from Clemson, when this was kind of the direction that things were headed for a little bit now. So I think it's, having all this success at actually, making those changes this offseason, would appear like, okay, they made a 180, but this is something that's been building for a while. And so, I can't say I predicted all of the changes. Like, I definitely didn't expect like the analyst hires and the aggressiveness in the transfer portal to the degree that they did. And I always envisioned when Clemson got into the transfer portal, it was going to be guys that they were going to satisfy needs, but maybe they were going to be depth pieces and not necessarily bona fide starters like a Will Helt.
Right.
And so, like, I think you've seen that change a little bit to a greater degree than maybe some of us expected. But at the end of the day, this was something that was, this was something they were building towards for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, yes, Dabo Swinney has shifted in maybe the type of coaches that he is now hiring. Obviously, I think it is well documented on this channel, and we're not the only ones that have been saying it, but Dabo Swinney got a little too inexperienced in his coaching staff, and that had to be rectified. But it has been rectified. If you go back and look, as far as, the Brandon Streeter firing and hiring Garrett Riley, and then you bring on Matt Luke, and then you bring on Chris Rump, and then you bring on Tom Allen, and so on and so forth. The list goes on and on. You have seen the correction of, okay, I need a little bit more experience, and I think a lot of these changes are due to rule changes, right? You see a lot of these analyst positions, that's due to rule changes. You see Tom Allen not being on the recruiting trail, at least the traveling recruiting trail. That's due to rule changes, right? You see a guy like, a guy like Garrett Riley still on the recruiting trail. That's because he wants to be. That's where he feels most comfortable, right? And then you see Ben Boulware get an opportunity with the linebackers with a guy like Tom Allen, kind of mentoring him there. And because you can give a guy like Ben Boulware a shot, because your coaching staff has been expanded to the point there's so much experience around him. He's not just out there flapping in the wind alone with the linebackers with no help, right? So I think a lot of the changes you have seen from Clemson is due to rule changes. And I like the direction that Dabo's taken the program. I was always a believer that Dabo Swinney wanted to win. I never was under the impression that he was just going to ride the ship down and watch what he built basically crumble and basically get relegated to, just another ACC football program that, is going to go to a bowl game every year. I never thought he was going to be satisfied with that. He's too competitive. I don't think he came to Clemson and built it up to the national football power that it is now, just to be like, well, I won two, so whatever. I'm going to hang out and collect my $11 million. That doesn't strike me as who Dabo is as a person or a coach. So it doesn't surprise me that he has started making changes, and he's always made it clear that he does make mistakes, but he's always going to do whatever he thinks is right for Clemson football. So, I'm happy with the changes that have been made. I can't wait to see how they all shake out. Some of them may be a hit. Some of them may not work out. But I'm excited for 2025. I think it could be a special year for our Clemson Tigers.
Absolutely. And I think that's one thing that the fan base just wanted to see. I mean, ultimately, you're not going to bat 1,000, with any decision you make. Like that's not, even when Clemson was winning national championships, like not every decision Dabo made was the right one. That's coaching. That's a part of life. You'll lose a game. You'll lose games because of it. But sometimes they hit and you win national championships because of them. That's how the sport works. And so I think what the fan base wanted to see was the willingness to change. And you're seeing the difference in the program now from where it was in 2021, 2022, where you made those internal hires and you didn't have the money to necessarily go and nab players in the transfer portal or beat out other school big time NIL spenders for some of your top guys. I think you're seeing the change, and it's a difference. So and the modernization of the program is what people are really excited to see. And now you have a really good team potentially heading into 2025 that we feel like has an opportunity to be really, really good.
Lots of returning talent, lots of returning snaps, lots of young guys that had to grow up a little bit last year that are going to be far better for it come 2025. It's really going to be fun to watch.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, guys, we'll be right back after a word from our very own Mark Rogers.
Ohio State, Michigan, the greatest rivalry in sports deserves the greatest debate in sports. Monday, February 17th at 6 p.m. Eastern Time on the main channel. It's the Ohio State, Michigan All Everything Debate with me, taking your calls all night if it takes all night. I'm pulling no punches, so beware. Bring your best intel. It's the Ohio State, Michigan All Everything Debate. It will be epic. February 17th, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Be there.
All right, guys, you heard Mark Rogers right there. Go check out the main channel and tell them that the guys over on the Clemson channel sent you over there, and that would be greatly appreciated, your support there. Also, guys, new show, new channel on the Voice of College Football. Do a show every Tuesday, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, called On the Move. They cover recruiting. They cover the transfer portal, all the big moves in college football, all your favorite players, what they're doing, who's in the transfer portal, who's not, who's talking to this player, who's not. Go check it out over on the new channel, On the Move, every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You will not regret it. It's a really good show, guys. Moving right into recruiting for the Clemson Tigers. 2025 is in the books. We are on to 2026, Jordan. And we're going to specifically focus on the offensive recruiting tonight. Obviously, we got the greatest offensive line coach in the country, Matt Luke, who was hard at work. We're in a recruiting dead period, so don't worry. Matt Luke is not talking to recruits right now. I promise, NCAA. Just chill out, okay? But he was hard working on the recruiting trail, burning up the jet fuel, going from place to place, seeing offensive lineman after offensive lineman, expanded Clemson's board a bit for this 2026 class and who we're gonna bring on. But let me pull up our 2026 guys real quick so everybody can see it. Can everybody see that?
I'm waiting on it. I can't see it. But while you're figuring that out, yeah, I mean, the offensive line is going to be a priority, and it's been very clear. If any of you guys are following recruiting, the offensive line is one of the biggest priorities in this class. I mean, you have a lot of guys that are potentially going to be leaving after this season, and you're going to have to restock the cupboard a good bit. So, and you've seen Matt Luke kind of expand the board for the offensive line in a way that most positions for Clemson you usually don't see. There are, I believe, 13 offers out right now, with potentially more to come. So this has been a very, very big priority for this class, and a lot of big time targets. I think one of the emphases, I guess I should say, for the offensive line and for Matt Luke was beefing up this offensive line, continuing to get more size, and you can see it by the guys that you see right here on the target list. You have one current commit in Braden Wilms, who is 6'8". So I mean that kind of tells you the whole story right there. But there are a lot of really talented guys and guys that I think Clemson is going to be pushing really hard for. There's quite a few of these guys that will be at the Elite Retreat on March 8th. I got to zoom in because I cannot see. I am blind. I don't want to focus on all of these guys because some of these guys I believe are trending elsewhere. But starting with Maxwell Riley from Ohio, Clemson, Ohio State battle. One of the things that is kind of swung that recruitment kind of in more of a flux. He was considered an Ohio State lean, but Ohio State recently lost their offensive line coach Justin Frye to the NFL. And Clemson has done a really good job recruiting him. Maxwell Riley, Matt Luke has visited him multiple times. He is probably, I would say that he is the number one guy, I think, on the board that they're pushing for right now. I feel like they would love to get him if they can. So big deal. And then and if you scroll down, there is another Ohio offensive lineman that you are also battling Ohio State for, in Adam Guthrie. I believe he just recently received a few crystal balls on On3 and on 24/7 Sports. Another recruitment that was definitely helped in Clemson's direction by Justin Frye going to the NFL. So those guys, I think, are guys that Clemson is really, really high on. Some of the other guys on this board, Carter Scruggs, I think, is going to be probably a Penn State, Georgia type of battle. I'm not sure that he's going to make it to the Elite Retreat. Who is that underneath Adam Guthrie? Yep, Zion Giles, in-state offensive lineman. I think this is a Clemson, Ohio State, Clemson, South Carolina battle. I think that's going to go down the stretch, and we'll see kind of how the official visits shake out. But I think that's one that you're going toe-to-toe with your in-state rival. Would be a really nice win because you have not been winning those in-state battles as of late. And I think it would be a good pickup for Clemson if they were able to win it, just even just for optics standpoint. Let's see. I already talked about Braden Wilms. You go down to the interior offensive lineman, Darius Gray. Another guy I think is probably trending elsewhere, but he does have an official visit lined up to Clemson on that May 30th date. But I do think that South Carolina is probably the team to beat right now. We'll see how that goes. Would be a really massive get, and obviously with Clemson, you never know because that official visit can change a lot of things. And getting him on campus first, sometimes that ends up being the difference. Leo Delaney, I think, is a guy that Clemson is in really good position for at Providence Day. I already mentioned Lonnie Galloway, the hire of Lonnie Galloway and the connections he has at Providence Day. I believe that will play a role in this recruitment. I think Tennessee is your main competition there. As I've talked about, Tennessee has been sweeping up the Charlotte area, and particularly Providence Day. As you know, they won that recruitment for David Sanders this past cycle. So I think Leo Delaney, another guy that's really, really high on their board, and one that I think a recruitment that Clemson can win. Tyler Merrill committed to Notre Dame. Not going to mention him. Grant Wise is a guy that I think Clemson is still very much in for. His recruitment is still kind of shaking out a little bit. Chancellor Galloway, or I'm sorry. Oh my gosh, I cannot read. Chancellor Barclay. Another guy whose recruitment is still kind of he hasn't been pushing to narrow his list down. I think his recruitment is still kind of taking off, but Clemson has done a really good job with him. And they've made him kind of a priority as well. Then you have Desmond Green, another in-state battle, I think, between Clemson and South Carolina, and Georgia is also in the mix. I think that one's going to come down to the official visits as well. And then Bear McWhorter, a guy that Clemson really likes, but is scheduled to commit, I believe, on the 28th. Alabama, I think, is probably going to end up winning that one. But you see kind of the list, and you see the size, especially when you look at the size of some of these guys, the height and the length, and some of the positional versatility that they have. That's kind of been the emphasis for this class. They want guys that with length and size, but they can also move and play a couple of different positions, because Clemson does love to have guys that can come in and play multiple positions. So really, really strong group of guys. A lot of these guys will be at the elite retreat. A couple of other names that of unoffered guys, 4-star offensive tackle Zayden Crimpin from Prosper, Texas. He is also going to be at the elite retreat as well. I expect him to get an offer pretty soon. And also a 3-star interior offensive lineman, Malcolm Gaston from North Augusta in South Carolina. He's a guy that I think Clemson is also kind of keeping an eye on, and we'll kind of see what happens probably into spring. So that kind of wraps up that offensive line board. I plan to do a series here pretty soon where I get to go in depth on some of these guys. But just wanted to give you guys a quick overview of some of the guys, the names to know, and kind of where Clemson is standing right now as we kind of get into the spring, and pretty soon, before you know it, we'll be in official visit season, and that's when your money is made. That's when the bread is buttered, whatever kind of expression you want to use. So massive class for this group, and for Clemson, because like I mentioned, you're going to have a lot of guys leave after this season, more than likely. And so it's going to be important that you restock the cupboard with guys that you are high on, that you think will be able to develop. A couple of impact guys would be great. But I think the profile of this group is really, really good for what Clemson wants to be offensively along the offensive line. And Matt Luke has done as good a job as anybody in the country right now. He's been working tirelessly. So really excited to see how this class shakes out. We're still in the beginning stages for some of these guys, and some guys, you're not going to win every single recruiting battle, but I think, if you can come out of here with, 5 or 6 guys in this class, I think that would be a really, really big deal for this, this line moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it'll turn out to be a really good class. Have all the faith in the world in Matt Luke and his ability to pull some of these guys from places like Ohio State and Tennessee and programs that we go head to head with all the time on the recruiting trail. So stay tuned for more recruiting news, guys. Obviously, Clemson's got that big official or big recruiting weekend, junior day, if you will, elite junior day, whatever you want to call it, on March 8th. That list is still, I think, being ironed out, but we got a lot of big time recruits coming to that weekend. I think the list is up to maybe 25, 28, somewhere in there, Jordan, of guys that are committed to coming to that elite junior weekend. So it's going to be a big weekend for Clemson. Obviously, that's the big recruiting weekend that was supposed to happen in January. January 25th was the original scheduled date for it. But with the turnover of the coaching staff and still trying to get the defensive coordinator locked in, which ultimately ended up being Tom Allen, they moved it to March 8th to give that time, a little bit of time to settle in between hiring a new DC and having a big recruiting weekend where there's going to be a lot of guys on campus. So looking forward to that recruiting weekend, looking forward to, some of these guys committing to Clemson. Obviously, the big recruiting weekend happening in June for Clemson every summer. So that'll be another big one. And I think a lot more of these guys will be ironed out or trending closer to whatever direction they're going to go by that time. So lots more recruiting news on the way. All right, guys, we got 37 people in the live chat right now. Thank you guys so much for being here. Hit that like button while you're in here. Really helps us out on these live videos. Want to bring your guys' attention to Mark Rogers' new book. If you did not know, Mark Rogers released his very first book, Disputed National Champions, College Football's Historical 1990s Reset. I got it right here. It's a great book. You can get it on Amazon, paperback for $9.99. And if you love college football, obviously you do. If you're listening to this show in the middle of the off season, obviously you really love college football. It will give you a deep dive into the chaotic world of college football championship decisions during the 1990s and that pivotal decade that reshaped sport in unprecedented ways, leaving fans and experts alike questioning the system of legitimacy of these crown champions. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in, or if you just kind of want to know about how the evolution of college football and how we went from, just bowl games to the BCS to the 14 playoff to the 12-team playoff, it'll kind of give you a look back into that major decade of college football and how it changed. I encourage you guys to go check it out. Again, get it on Amazon right here on your screen, $9.99 for a paperback. Make sure you leave a review and let Mark know how you liked it. Or if you have a Kindle, you can get it on the Kindle app for just 99 cents. Support Mark Rogers because he gives us this great platform that we get to get on here and talk about Clemson football and college football. So your support with that would be greatly appreciated.
Yep. It's a great read. Make sure that you leave a review if you do buy it. And yeah.
Go get it. See, not a very big book.
Nope.
Won't take you any time to read it, but a very good read indeed. So go check it out. And we'll go ahead and leave that there. Speaking of recruiting, Jordan, our old buddy Josh Pate had a nice little take on our Clemson Tigers in one of his most recent episodes of the College Football Show with Josh Pate, I think is the new name of it now. But anyways, I'm sure everybody on here already knows who Josh Pate is, but if you don't know, obviously he's a college football personality for 247 Sports, has a great college football show here on YouTube that he does each and every week multiple times and does a lot of good content. But obviously in one of his recent episodes, Jordan, he had some comments about Clemson's future and how, in his opinion, he's not so sure which direction the Clemson football program is heading. And some of the reasons that he stated in his opinion of why he feels like Clemson may be trending in the wrong direction was none other than the 2025 recruiting class. Obviously, me and you have talked several times on this channel about the 2025 recruiting class and the struggles that Clemson went through during while signing that 2025 class. Obviously, losing 6, 7, whatever it ended up being, decommits, which is very unusual for a place like Clemson. But some of the reasons behind that was obviously Clemson didn't have its NIL in a place where they were necessarily competitive with a lot of these schools. And you had schools like Duke and Georgia Tech and other schools that swooped in, keyed on one player, and kind of pooled their NIL money towards that one player, pulled them away from Clemson. And it ultimately ended up in Clemson falling completely out of the top 25 when it comes to recruiting, which is something that Clemson hasn't done since 2010. So Dabo was hired way back in 2008, and that was this past recruiting class is the worst ranked class since 2010. So that is something there is something to be said about that. But he basically went on to say that was one of the reasons that he thought Clemson was trending in the wrong direction. He also went on to say that Clemson isn't close. They're not close to Texas. They're not close to Ohio State. They're not close to the leaders of the SEC, which would obviously be Georgia, Alabama, LSU, those type of programs. So, Jordan, I'm sure you heard what Josh Pate had to say. What were your thoughts on kind of what he said? And he, to his credit, he did say he's not set in stone on this, but it was just how he feels currently at this moment about the Clemson football program going forward. He did mention that 2025 could be a really good year for Clemson.
Yeah. I definitely, took him what he said. And obviously, initially, the fan in me was kind of like a little bit taken aback. But I do think he did make some quality points. Obviously, we've talked about this 2025 recruiting class and how they did not meet the standard and they did not meet where they wanted to be. And not even and I'm not even talking about just where they landed in as far as the rankings was concerned. It just in terms of the quality of player, the guys that they had on the board, the guys that they had committed that they weren't able to hold on to. That was not something that that was obviously a very, very big disappointment and a failure.
Yes.
And so, Clemson can't afford to have classes like this yearly. And I think that's something that I think pretty much anybody will agree. Like that you're not going to be able to do that. I think there were issues with Josh's kind of he kind of neglected the fact that Clemson only signed 15 players. Obviously, that does play a big role especially in the 24/7 sports ranking where volume is weighted more than say on 3. And so it was kind of it was a little disingenuous, but I think the main point, I think there was some truth there. And so my thing is, I don't think that Clemson is going to fall off a cliff after next season. Like I that's not where I am. And I especially feel a lot more confident with what Clemson has done addressing needs this cycle, that Clemson would, if there was need, needs after next year, which there will be, that they are willing to address them in more ways than just the high school recruiting class.
Yes.
And I think they're off to a better start and in a better position to hold on to hold on to their commits this go around. I feel like they are going to make it a effort not to have, as many decommits as you did in 2025 and the caliber of decommit that you had. I mean, you have what 4 or 5 top 100 kids that decommitted. That makes a huge difference in kind of a recruiting class. So I think the volume was kind of neglected because when you take into account the player average, Clemson was 17th nationally, which still isn't great. It's not great by Clemson standards, but it does it does put into perspective that the quality of player that they're bringing in wasn't necessarily that far down. But, so I think, like I said, you're not going to be able to afford to recruit this way and have this kind of class every single cycle. But I definitely don't think that's going to happen. And I think that Clemson is in a position where they will, especially now, that they will address whatever needs to come next year. And I think they're going to have a better recruiting class in 2026 than they did in 2025. I think they have shifted. I think the 2025 class was a little bit of a learning curve. It was a little bit different because, you just had schools come in and swoop and offer your guys a lot more money than you were willing to pay for them. And, that it just is what it is. And so, especially if you combine that with a really successful season, I do think it's pivotal that Clemson, has the kind of season that we, at least close to the kind of season that we think they can have. I think that will also help a ton in terms of your recruiting efforts. You just got to win games. And, this past season, while you took some steps forward in a lot of ways, I mean, you got embarrassed on national television in your first game. You got embarrassed at home. You lost to your rival. And so, when you compound those things with a class that's not very big, and, you don't, there are other schools that are willing to pull their NIL money to come and take it. That's a recipe for having your guys poached. And that's something that Clemson has had to deal with, even in the previous cycles. And they were better. They were just, more fortunate at holding on to those kids than they were this cycle. So I think Josh has kind of drawn the ire of the fan base a little bit. And I definitely understand a little bit what he's saying, why the fan base feels the way they do. But I do think there is some valid points in there, because especially if I were an outsider and I saw Clemson with the 26th recruiting class, you're going to make conclusions off the jump without looking into it. That's the nature of the sport. And so I understand completely from that standpoint, but I do think it's a lot more nuanced than, they had the 26th class, and so that means that they're falling off a cliff. I don't see it that way, and we'll just have to see, because I think there are a lot of I think this is a better class than the rankings will give them credit for. I think there's quite a few guys that I think could play a role for you this year. Not in some major capacity like start, but I think there are guys that will, especially down the line, will be really, really good football players. And so I'm not necessarily worried about one class that looks like this. But if you start to make it 2, 3, and you see the 2023 and 2024 classes cycle out, now we're talking about a significant dip in talent from where you were, where you are now, and where you've been. So, Josh is usually I think Josh is more fair to Clemson than people think, but I do think there was some nuance that he left out when he was talking about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I don't agree with his premise on Clemson football as a program moving forward.
Yeah.
I vehemently disagree with his sentiments on Clemson moving forward. However, to say that he's wrong about the 2025 class is silly, right? It's the 2025 class was unacceptable. And yes, it was a small class, and we only signed 15 guys. Ultimately, I think ended up 28th overall in the country. But even with the smaller class, we've had smaller class in the past and finished much higher than that. So, although that is something to consider when looking at the overall ranking, it was still a subpar class from Clemson standards. Now, with that said, I don't think it's like the end of Clemson football, and now they're going to spiral down to a 6-6, 5-7 football team because one recruiting class just didn't go our way, and it didn't go our way for a lot of reasons. Part of it was NIL, part of it was other teams just coming in and keying in on one player, and they were going to offer basically whatever it took to pry them away from Clemson. And Clemson was unfortunately not in the correct position to combat that. And that's something that I think has since started to be rectified. You talked about earlier in the show about the increase in NIL when Graham Neff was like, hey, check it out. The same points that you get for donating to IPTE, you're going to get for donating to the 110 Society, right? And then donations increased, right? And we were able to hold on to all of these guys in the postseason, right? We were able to bring back an Antonio Williams. We were able to bring back a Blake Miller. We were able to, bring a lot of these veteran guys who could have gone to the NFL otherwise back because of that. So I've already seen Clemson pivot in a direction to correct those things. So that's one of the reasons that I disagree with Josh Pate going forward. Now, to your point, you can't have another recruiting class like this. This has to be an anomaly, because if this trend continues, you will be a 6-6, 5-7 type of team, quick, fast, and in a hurry in today's college football, right? But again, I do think ultimately 2025 being ranked 28th overall will ultimately end up being an anomaly for Clemson. Typically, Clemson is in the 9 to 15 range, if you will. If you average it out over, the last 15, 16, 17 seasons, Clemson is anywhere from, 15 to 9th. Yeah, we had a couple years there in 2020 and 2021 where we finished 3-5. But outside of those 2 years, we've never cracked the top 5. And we've never been there consistently. We've always been, just outside the top 10 or right inside the top 10, somewhere within 2 or 3 rankings of that. So got to get back to that in 2026. I think we will. And to your point about the transfer portal, Dabo has now proven to everyone that he is willing, if there's a hole, he's willing to go grab that starter if need be, i.e. Will Helt, right? He's willing to go grab a depth piece for the wide receiver room, right? He's willing to do these things in order to add to a roster. So to your point, if next season somehow there's a hole here, hole here, hole here, hole there, I believe he will go out and get the best possible player that Clemson can land in order to fill that spot. So that's another reason that I don't agree with his long-term projection of Clemson football. I think Dabo Swinney has pivoted when it comes to his coaching staff, and coaching truly matters in this sport more than people are willing to admit. Yes, it's about talent acquisition, and it's about identifying and acquiring high school talent and developing them. But it's about coaching. It's about developing those players when they're on your roster. It's about the X's and O's. It's about in-game adjustment. It's about setting your players up for success. You can have the most talented roster, and if you got a terrible coach, he's not going to do much with it, right? So I think the pivot's been made there. So I understand what Josh Pate was saying, and from an outside perspective, like you were saying, I get that people are still leery of Clemson football. Are they really turning the corner? Are they really, taking a step back into what they used to be? I understand that from an outside perspective. I have full confidence as a Clemson fan that we have started to turn that corner and are heading back in the right direction. But I fully get people from the outside still questioning Clemson football. And all you got to do in 2025 is go out there and win, because ultimately 2024 was a big improvement, specifically on the offensive side of the ball. But they can still point to, you lost to the only 3 SEC teams you played. You got embarrassed in week 1. You lost to your rival. and then you lost in the college football playoff to another SEC team in Texas. So the only 3 SEC teams you played, you lost. And guess what? For the second year in a row, you lost 4 games. So there are arguments to be made to be like, well, how much of an improvement was 2024 for Clemson? Yeah, you got to the ACC championship game and won and went to the playoffs, but you still lost 4 games, right? So there is criticism out there. I don't agree with it because I think Clemson, although they still lost 4 games, there was a lot more improvement, and they were a far different team than the 2023 version. And if you watch them, you would know that. But there's valid criticism out there for this program still. And all Clemson and Dabo Swinney have to do in 2025 is go out there and win games, starting with that first one. That first game is so important to Clemson's 2025 season, not because if we lose it, the season's over and we're not going to make the playoffs and, we might as well just go home and hang up the pads for the rest of the season. But from a national perspective, that LSU game is huge. Clemson has to win that game just because of the national narrative that has started to be painted for Clemson football over the last 3 to 4 seasons. They need that win, and it would do well to make it a little convincing of a win as well. So we'll see how it goes, though.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's a fantastic point. This opener is this is arguably the biggest opener that Clemson has had in at least this decade. I mean, you could say 2021 Georgia was big, but obviously that team wasn't very good in retrospect. The Clemson team wasn't very good in retrospect.
Yeah.
Georgia again, and this past season, but I think this one from a national narrative standpoint, I don't think I think it's massive because you weren't the favorite last year to beat Georgia. You were double-digit underdogs. We said going into that game that this was not going to define your season. I do think that this game could potentially define your season, or maybe not define your season, but define how you're viewed
from a national perspective. Yes, absolutely.
And so, I mean, that's, and, from a recruiting standpoint, you're at home. And if you lose this game, that's 2 straight losses at home, if you date back to last year, because you lost to South Carolina. So right. That would put a pretty big damper. I mean, and like I said, it wouldn't end your season, and all your goals would still be in front of you. But now nobody's going to have any respect for anything you do within the ACC. So, unless South Carolina is good again and you beat them, that would be the only thing that would redeem you from a national perspective, because nobody thinks the ACC is any good. Even though I think this ACC schedule is not easy for Clemson this year.
No, it's not an easy schedule. There's some pitfalls that we already talked about when we kind of broke down the schedule a couple weeks ago. But yeah, I mean, from a national perspective, I think you're right. This game couldn't be any bigger, and I think you need to win it, convincingly. Not kicking a second field goal to win the game. I think you need to win, by 10 points, right? No disrespect to LSU, but Clemson needs this from a national perspective. The only way to start turning some of the opinions when it comes to the national media on Clemson is you got to go in there and assert your will against a team like LSU on national television, because it's going to be a huge buildup. It's going to be built up, and you go out there and you assert your dominance against a team like that. That will start to, it won't completely, but it will start to turn the tide when it comes to the opinions of the national media and national college football fans as a whole that don't pay attention to every single move that Clemson did in the offseason, right? They don't know that you hired so-and-so as a defensive analyst and so-and-so as an offensive analyst. Oh, and you got this front office guy. They don't know any of that, right? The only thing that's going to matter is, what do you look like week 1 in Death Valley against LSU, an SEC program, right? That's what people are going to care about. So You got to go in there. You got to take care of business, and you got to look like that you are clearly the better team. And that will start to help Clemson when it comes to the national narrative. So I certainly think this roster is capable of doing that. But again, we'll see. There's a long time between now and then. You still got a whole spring practice, another transfer portal window, and fall camp. So tons of time between now and then for things to continue to trend in a positive direction, or for other things to happen as well. So we'll see how it goes. It's a long off season, unfortunately.
Yeah. Jay says LSU could be a championship contender. We're saying it's not a success to just win week one. No, that's not what we're saying. We're not a win, no matter how it looks, is a must for Clemson. I'm
just saying I'm saying a win would be great. I'm just saying to start changing the narrative and how people talk as far as the national media goes when it comes to Clemson, a convincing win would go a long way in doing that.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying I wouldn't be happy if Clemson kicked a last-second field goal and beat LSU in Death Valley. I'd absolutely be 100% okay with that. I'm just talking about the narratives when people talk about Clemson. That's all I'm talking about.
All right.
All right, guys, we'll go ahead and leave that there. We got 36 people in the live chat right now. Hit that like button, hit that like button, hit that like button. Help us out. If you're not subscribed, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Me and Jordan do the All-In Show right here every Wednesday at 8 p.m. talking Clemson football and college football. So thank you guys for being here. Also, go over to X and check out the Voice of College Football Network over on X. The official X account for the Voice of College Football, the best discussion, debate, and analysis with no off season. So go check it out, give it a follow. And also while you're over there, give our buddy Jordan Bowman a follow as well. His handle is right there under his picture.
Yep.
All right, with that said, Jordan, that is the end of the planned portion of our show. So we still have 37 people in here. So let's turn it over to the people and see what they're talking about.
Yep, let's do it. Had a couple started from earlier in the show. Isaac asked earlier in the show, he said, I know Grisham was in a lot of fans' doghouse before we landed Wesco Moore. How do y'all feel about Grisham now heading into the 25 season? I've been one to defend Tyler Grisham against some criticism. I think some of the things that people were upset with him for in previous cycles was warranted, but I think he's done a good job overall with his group, and ultimately the guys that he's recruited are the ones that were successful and the ones that made impacts. Ever since he's been the wide receiver coach, whether it was Bo Collins in 2021 being basically your best receiver, outside of half of Justin Ross. And then 2022, obviously you bring in Antonio Williams, he makes a big impact. And Tyler Brown, and now Wesco and more, like those, the guys he's bringing in are guys that have become really good players for you. I think he's been really unlucky with the injuries that have happened to some of his recruits, and just even from the beginning of his tenure, like that was just the wide receiver room was in a bad way, and he was an inexperienced guy being tasked to reconstruct a room that was it was full of the same body type, and none of those guys got any better. And
it was full of guys that couldn't get separation.
Nope.
And when they did, they weren't consistent with catching the ball. Perimeter blocking was basically non-existent. So it definitely hampered a lot what we did with our offense at that point in time. So
and then you couple that with who your quarterback was for the first couple of years.
And to be fair, I think Grisham caught a fair some of the criticism directed towards Tyler Grisham was fair.
Yeah.
And he needed to prove himself, but I think he has started to prove himself, right? You mentioned the guys that he personally recruited, Antonio Williams, Tyler Brown, Brian Wesco, TJ Moore. Like, so, I mean, that's a fair group of guys that have, performed really well and produced for Clemson. So, was he a very young and inexperienced coach and maybe given the position before he was ready for it? Yes.
Yeah.
But I think that he's shown enough improvement and brought on enough high-level talent that, he's bought himself time to continue to improve and to see if he can keep putting together these wide receiver rooms that are really good.
Yeah. Because so far, I mean, the evaluation piece for him has been really good.
It's been pretty good, yeah.
He has an eye for talent. Like, nobody expected Tyler Brown to come in and be as good as he was as a freshman.
No.
Little kid, under recruited, undersized receiver from Greenville. You're just a really good football player.
Yep.
Great evaluation, and obviously last season was pretty unfortunate. And you even think of a guy like Troy Stellato, who he brought in, and we saw how good he can be when he's healthy. But it just
he
was never healthy.
Yeah, but when he was, I mean, a really good wide receiver.
Yeah,
just a guy that unfortunately just could never consistently stay on the field.
Yeah,
and even when he was on the field, he was majority of the time hampered in some way. By just nagging injuries. So,
then you still got Cole Turner, who has a lot of time left to continue to develop, and there's not a lot of pressure on him with the room that you have this year. He's going to have a room to he doesn't have to be a big time playmaker for you. You can put him in spots, and you saw that a little bit last year, and he made some plays for you. And so, like, that's my thing. Like, I think Tyler Grisham has kind of been undersold by the fan base in a lot of ways because of those reasons. But also, I think he did. There were fair criticisms, especially in those early years. The quality of play was just not up to standard. But
yeah.
You also got to realize, well, those guys, a lot of those players you had flat out just weren't good. They transferred out; they weren't good anywhere else.
It's true. They did.
That's one position we have not had a single player at receiver leave and have a better season than at any point that they had at Clemson.
Right. It's not like these dudes left and suddenly became 7, 8, 9,000 yard receiver. Right.
Yeah. Even Bo Collins didn't have a better year than any year he had at Clemson this past year at Notre Dame. I mean, he was fine, but he
was okay. But
yeah,
I mean, I'm not trying to, but if he was a part of the roster last year and wouldn't have left,
he would have played, but I don't know. Like,
how much really would he have played? Like, I think.
Especially in the second half of the year.
Yeah, I think Brian Wesco and TJ Moore still do what they did, even if he was on the roster.
Yeah.
I think he eventually falls behind them on the depth chart, much like a guy like Adam Randall did, right? So,
I guess that's probably I guess Adam Randall is probably the one that just. But again, he tore his ACL his freshman year, and it just never looked the same. He came in and was.
Yeah, I mean, you remember all the conversations coming out of camp about that guy?
Yeah.
And then obviously the ACL tear and just never the same since. But I mean, it wasn't just coaches, but player. Like everybody was like, "This dude is crazy," and unfortunately, it seems that the injuries took a lot of what was special about him at the receiver position away. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah. Indeed it is. But he still has a chance. He's still on the roster, and he still has an opportunity to make an impact, whether it's at running back.
He's going to try his hand at running back, and we'll see where that goes.
We'll see where that goes. That was a long-winded answer to that question, but the Tyler Grisham discourse always is in this fan base is always really like touch and go. People are very opinionated on him, but I'm currently in the pro Grisham camp right now. I'm not. That doesn't mean that I could change. I could totally change my mind if the receivers come out this year and look bad, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think this receiver room is going to be pretty fun. Michael says, how much is going to football from the settlement versus basketball? Yeah, we don't know. I mean, we know the majority will likely go to football, but beyond that.
The comments that Dabo has said, I mean, no one, he's never come out and given a number, like a percentage, but he has said on more than one occasion, no one will be putting more money towards football than Clemson. So whatever that means. Obviously, in my mind, a huge portion, most of that money is going towards football, and the rest will be divvied up between basketball and then sprinkled throughout some of the other sports as well.
Yep.
Heavy football.
Yeah, that's what I would expect. And because basketball, it kind of has a unique situation too with their funding. So I think they would be okay, especially the men's side of things. Especially they're okay NIL wise.
You could supplement, with NIL over there a lot easier than you can in football.
Yeah. Dylan says, late getting in, is Adam Guthrie a lock? Well, I never call anybody a lock on this channel, but because I'm glad I didn't call anybody a lock this past cycle, because oh boy, would I have.
We'd have been off on a bunch of them.
Yeah. But no, I do think Clemson has taken the lead in his recruitment. He has not set a commitment date, so I'm not expecting. Who knows? But as far as I know, he hasn't set a commitment date yet. So there's still some work to be done. But I think recent developments with Ohio State staff have helped you a ton. And he would be a great get. He is nasty. I love his tape. Maybe I'll do a video on him. Tig says, all I know is Clemson, FSU, and Miami need out of the ACC soon or follow way behind the SEC. Yeah, I mean, well, they're laying the groundwork, and we'll see kind of what comes out of all of the the talk and about restructuring the revenue sharing model and the buyout and all of that. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, right. You're not in trouble yet, but as we get
at the end of the day, however long Clemson or FSU or Miami or North Carolina or whoever spends in the ACC, we're going to be competing at a financial disadvantage. Yeah. That's just the fact of the matter.
That's been the case forever.
That's been the case for forever. But it is that gap is going to get very large very soon. And yes, the ACC is talking about restructuring how they divvy out revenue and unequal shares and all that kind of stuff. And it'll help, but you're not going to get close to what the SEC or the Big Ten are going to make. But if by all these lawsuits, FSU and Clemson can get a settlement from the ACC that says you can leave for far less money come 30-31 or 2031, excuse me, 30-31.
I was like, phew. Yeah, 1,000 years.
Will be here, so it won't matter. 2031, which marries up nicely with all the other TV deals coming back up for reevaluation. Then I think the lawsuits were worth it, right? Yes, do you have to be in the ACC until 2030, 2031? Is that ideal? No. But what are you going to do at this point? but I think the lawsuits will have served their purpose if you get that reduced buyout, 2030, 2031 timeframe in time to shell out that money and then hopefully get into one of the two big conferences, right?
Yeah. David mentions Clemson trying to get AAU certification. Yeah, that's something that's been in the works. It's a process, so
It's
it'll
tough.
give them some time.
Yeah.
But they are working toward it. I know Florida State has also been working toward it. So
It's not out of the realm of possibility for Clemson to be there by 2030.
Yep.
They already do a lot in research. So
yeah. Georgia Tech Steve Cook says, Georgia Tech fan in the house. Thank you for joining us.
Love having other fans stop by and hang out with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I am a little salty from last week.
Even though y'all keep stealing players, y'all need to chill out over there.
And I didn't care for their basketball team beating us on our home floor, but
that's not cool.
Who knows? Maybe we don't beat Duke and Carolina without that.
Yeah,
that's
true. That's true. So, thank you? Question mark.
Yeah. Question mark. Exactly. Intelligent Savage 629 says Devin Fitzgerald, son of Larry Fitzgerald, strong as well as Morgan out of Alabama, wide receiver in 2026 class. What's your guys' thoughts? I haven't watched him, but yeah, Clemson has been in on him. It's strange that that Larry Fitzgerald had. It still boggles my mind. So it is crazy. But yeah, Clemson has been showing him a lot of love, and they're trying to get they're going to get him on campus here pretty soon, I think. But I'll definitely when I do wide receivers, I'll have more to say. But I haven't watched his film yet.
Maybe we can get him there for the junior day.
Yeah. Dabo letting the new coaches know to get themselves ready for the Hill rundown coming. Which coach do you have handling the new task best, and who do you have as being shaky first time out?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about our buddy Tom Allen, man. I don't know. I don't know if he's gonna like that Hill run.
He's
he's
not a young guy anymore.
Yeah, he's not. He's not the most spry young individual anymore. I know Dabo enjoys it, but I'm not so sure some of the newer coaches are very excited about running down that hill. But I mean, they got the one in the indoor to practice, so we can get a couple reps in before the real deal.
Yep, I know Ben Boulware will be all over it. I think.
Oh man,
so.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I'm sure he can't wait to run down the hill again.
Yeah,
but not every coach on the staff is as young and fit as Ben Boulware is. So he could still strap it up if he needed to.
Yeah. Who knows? We might need him to.
Yep.
Jay says not having a backup running back all year is kind of insane to me, regardless of the player responsibility excuse. You recruited the guy who wasn't responsible enough to take the job. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it. It's it is what it is at this point. I definitely think you can't go into 2025 not having a solidified. Well, I mean, now you have an RB1 battle, but you need to have a solidified RB2, backup guy that you're comfortable with giving carries. I'm more and more of the belief that it will ultimately be Gideon Davidson that is your first running back. I think he's too good not to play, and they've shown that they are more than willing to play freshman running backs.
Yeah,
when they're highly recruited, at least, like Will Shipley was. So I think you will have a solid backup that gets carries. I hope. If not,
there's some solid guys from a talent standpoint there. You need one or two of those guys to step up, and really, really progress this spring and show that they are capable of handling a workload out there, whether it be protecting the football or blitz pickup or, pass pro and, all the stuff that the running backs are asked to do. Some of those guys that have been in the system for a few, they just need to step up, man, because if you're in that room right now and Gideon Davison rolls in and becomes RB1, that should be an indictment on every single one of you who have been in the program. And that's not, no slight at Gideon Davison at all. I fully expect, like you, that he will be RB1 because he is that talented. And I think he's going to come in ready to roll. It'll just be about him learning the playbook and the protections and all of that stuff. But physically, I think he'll be ready from day one to come in and be RB1. But that should put everybody on that who's already in that room on notice that, it's time to step up. Because we saw this past year that having just one in Phil Maffa, regardless of how great he was, it ended up hurting us at the end of the season when, ultimately he was hurt, and it changed a lot of what we do on offense, not for the better. So definitely got to have a better depth situation at the running back position this coming season.
Yep. Let's see. Dylan says, "Yeah, I'm more upset of losing a recruit to Georgia Tech than basketball."
Yeah.
I mean, when you lose a guy like Tay Harris, yeah, especially.
Yeah, that one hurts a little bit.
Yeah, that one hurts a little bit. Let's see. Tiger Tom says, let's not forget that good things happened after the 19th ranked 2010 class, which included the likes of Vic Beasley. That is a very good point. And sometimes it comes from the guys you least expected. So, it's when we talk about recruiting in this class, ultimately, you still have, I think you have some guys with potential to be, really, really good football players, outplay their ranking. I mean, and you still have a few really like high level players, Gideon Davisons and Amari Adams and Braden Jacobs and Ari Watford. Like, I think those guys are guys that, were coveted by a lot of big time programs. So like you still have a really good top of your class, and, you have some developmental pieces and some guys that could potentially be better than their ranking would suggest. And so we'll see how it works out. Because sometimes it's, like I said, it's the guys you least expect sometimes. Desperate Man says the biggest issue I think is not having a backup quarterback. Vizina has taken 0 meaningful snaps. I think the staff is confident in Chris Vizina. Take that for what it is. He's been sitting in the system a while now, so I mean. Did you really need to go get a quarterback to be his backup when he's presumably the next in line after next season? I don't necessarily think so. I'm not really. It's a concern for sure, but I think it's a lot different than when Chris Vizina came in and super green and he's your backup quarterback. Like, it's different now. He's practiced under the Riley system. He's familiar, and I do think he has some traits that will lend itself well if he does get thrown into a situation where he has to play. I mean, his mobility is very much a plus, and so we'll see. But I wouldn't say that's number one on my concern as far as the offense. But I would like to see Chris get out there at different points this year, hopefully that means you're blowing teams out.
Yep.
Georgia Tech Steve asks, what ACC game do you guys see as Clemson's biggest challenge? You could rank them 1 through 3. Obviously, Georgia Tech has the Tigers circled on our schedule. I would think Georgia Tech would be in that top 3.
Yeah, I think Georgia Tech's number 1
ACC, at least. Yeah. You said number 1?
I think Georgia Tech's number 1 for me. I think that. Yeah, like he said, they're circling the Tigers on the schedule. Brent Key's got them trending in the right direction. Their recruiting's been, going crazy lately. They do pretty well in the transfer portal. Got their quarterback back for another season. So, and Haynes King. So, that could potentially be a tough game. Luckily, we get it after, Troy on the schedule, but still could end up being a tough game. Louisville is another one right after.
That's my number 1.
Yeah, right after you play Florida State, and obviously Florida State 2-10, but I don't think anyone expects them to repeat quite that terrible of a performance again. Not that they're going to be, I don't know that they're going to be competing for an ACC championship game appearance. I don't know that they quite turn it around like that, but do expect Florida State to be significantly better than 2-10. One would assume, and then you turn around, after that game and play Louisville on the road on a Friday night. That's a tough game as well. A team that came in your house and beat you in a night game in the Valley last year. So there will be some payback implications on Clemson's part, but still a really tough game going on the road to Louisville on a Friday night. I just don't like how that game falls. So you might be right. That might be the number 1, but I just got a feeling that Georgia Tech game is not going to be a very fun game either.
Yeah. I'm with you. I mean, just with how competitive they've been under Brent Key, like they haven't always won the game, but when they're going toe to toe with Georgia, probably should have won that game. Haynes King is a warrior. I mean, I don't expect the first time Clemson played Haynes King was kind of an anomaly in terms of his performance. That was one of the worst games I'd ever seen him play. And they're going to be at home this go around. Yeah. So I would put, if I rank it 1 through 3, I'm going to go number 1 at Louisville on a Friday night. Number 2, I'll say at Georgia Tech, and 3 is kind of a toss up. I'm going to say at home against SMU just because they were the ACC champ or the ACC runner-up playoff team.
Yeah,
they have some pieces to replace, but they returned their quarterback in Kevin Jennings, and I think he's going to be I think he's a really good football player. Brett Lashley's always going to have that offense humming. So,
yeah, he's always going to be good. I mean, it is a tough task to replace basically your entire offensive line. Anytime you do that, especially at a place like SMU, just stepping up into the Power 4, that could be somewhat of an issue for them. But again, you expect Brett Lashley to have that offense in a pretty good position regardless. Duke could possibly be another game. I mean, not that they're lighting the world on fire, but Manny Diaz, his defense, they
bring in Mensa from Tulane, Darian Mensa.
They've done some pretty good stuff in the transfer portal. You expect them to have a pretty good defense next season. So that could potentially be another one. Syracuse, I don't think so. I think they just lost too much. They had a really good season a year ago, but they lose a lot from last year's team. So,
and it's so much about like ranking this schedule is because is the fact that a lot of these teams have so many unknowns.
Right.
We don't know what North Carolina is going to look like.
Yeah, I don't even know how to talk about North Carolina. Like,
me neither.
Who is North Carolina? I don't know.
I don't know.
They could be absolutely terrible, and then they could like somehow be really good. I don't know. Like, I don't even know how. Like, if there's a North Carolina fan out there, I would love to hear what they think about what they're going to be year one under Bill Belichick. Like, because I just really, I guess I don't have an opinion on North Carolina because I just don't know what they're going to be. I'm not convinced that the Bill Belichick experiment's going to work out. That's just me. But, yeah, I agree with yours. I think I'll go Georgia Tech 1, Louisville 2, SMU 3. So flip-flopped on 1 and 2. But, yeah, a couple tough games. Not the easiest of schedules that Clemson's had. There's some good teams in there.
Yeah. And again, and then some teams that are complete unknowns. The North Carolina. What is Florida State? And BC is always a team that can randomly pop up and beat.
That's true. I mean, they got a really good coach. So they could pop. What if FSU turns it around and has another? They strike gold in the portal again like they did. 2 years ago, that can make the schedule significantly harder. So, and then you book in with LSU and South Carolina. So, yeah,
there's some landmines there.
There's definitely some uneven terrain there for Clemson football to navigate, if you will.
All right, let's do a couple more. James Thompson says moving wide receiver to running back should put the whole room on notice. Yeah, I agree. I think there's going to be a concerted effort to get these guys ready. You can't have the situation you did last year. That's for sure. And but I think it helps a ton.
Yeah, I mean, look,
to bring in Gideon Davidson.
Yeah, to James's point, that's the coaching staff telling each one of those guys, you're not good enough.
Yeah,
we're gonna move this wide receiver over to running back. Oh, by the way, we trusted him more to practice. 4 times at running back in our playoff and start in our playoff game. Than we did you. We didn't trust you, but we trusted this wide receiver to move, who had never pass blocked a day in his life.
Yeah.
It's
going to be important because again, you still have Jay Haynes recovering from, his torn ACL. So, I mean that.
Yeah. He's not going to be ready anytime soon.
Yeah.
So maybe sometime in fall camp he'll be cut loose, but you never know.
Yeah. Trevor S. I haven't been keeping up with recruiting. Are we offering NIL for recruits, or are we still doing the first-year internship deal? I'm not in a position to say, because Clemson is doing things a little bit differently this cycle with how they've gone about approaching NIL. We'll see whether it pays off. That's all I'm going to say. Jay says, is it bad? I'm more confident in backup quarterback than running back. A little. But I'm of the opinion that I think the running back situation is going to work out. Call it, hope, wishful thinking, but I really think it's going to work itself out because just rarely over the years has Clemson had poor running back play.
Hey, look, it's February. We got plenty of time to be optimistic.
Yeah, that's true.
We have plenty of time. February is the perfect time to be like, it'll work itself out. It'll be just
exactly.
fine.
And then the season comes around and things don't go well, and I can pretend I never said any of it.
Yeah, we'll be like, oh God, I told you this running back room was terrible.
Y'all won't go and fact check us, right? No.
Yeah. No, don't be clipping nothing now.
No, don't clip this. Don't clip this. Yeah, John says, how many teams have backup quarterbacks that play hundreds of snaps and recorded 50 touchdowns and 5,000 yards in their career? Yeah, I get what you're saying. Like, also, especially in this day and age, there's not many schools that have just experienced backup quarterbacks. Like, that's just. I think Vizina has the tools to be a capable starter, potentially a very good starter, and I think that's enough for now. And we'll see whether or not and if he gets the opportunity, I hope he gets a chance to show it, because I do think the staff is really high on him. He's waited his turn. Like, I mean, he's a guy that could have hit the portal and gone somewhere else, but he loves Clemson, and he's in the system. He has a great relationship with the coaches. I think you give him the shot if it comes.
Yep.
All right, let me try to do one more. David talking about, South Carolina lost again. Still have not won a game in conference. Pretty remarkable.
Can't believe we lost to them.
Dude, rivalry games in college basketball, sometimes that just happens.
Crazy.
It just happens. It sucks, but it just happens. I saw a funny stat on the South Carolina thing. One of their players, Jordan Butler, he's a transfer from Missouri, I believe. They didn't win a single game in conference last season when he was a freshman. He transfers to South Carolina, and they haven't won a single conference game. So I believe he is 0-31.
Dang.
In conference.
So he's the problem. Common denominator is
that is incredibly bad luck. Even in a league like the SEC that's really good this year. Like,
that's got to be some sort of record, and
that's hard to do, man.
Yeah.
you leave, and it's funny because he left Missouri, and Missouri's having a really good year now. Like, so
they were like, "Oh, thank God we cut that dead weight."
Yeah. Speaking,
I don't know that guy, so I'm not trying to disrespect him. I'm just joking.
Yeah. Speaking of guys that thought they were leaving for greener pasture, shout out to RJ Godfrey. There have been some rumors about him. He might want to come back.
Not working out too well for him, huh?
I think it got mentioned on the Roar the other day.
Should have stayed pat where he was.
It would have helped. It would have been much nicer. We probably would have won that Georgia Tech game if you have RJ Godfrey coming in for Victor Larkin when he gets in foul.
Yeah, when Larkin fouls out with 3 minutes to go in the game, and then you don't have a big presence there.
Yeah.
So
you got Christian Reeves, who
been absolutely just balling out lately.
Yeah, he's been a superstar.
Yeah,
he's been a lot of fun.
Dropped 20 on North Carolina in the first half.
Yeah.
And then said, I'm going to stop scoring now.
Yeah.
I'll let Chase Hunter take over.
Yeah. He's so fun, man. He's become like a legitimate go-to weapon. Like that, it was such a different way from anything. And that's what makes me excited about this Clemson team, because as special as last year's team was, their stuff had to go through PJ Hall. It was because Chase Hunter had his run at the end of the year, but he had some stretches last season where, he part of the reason was he had to be a ball dominant guard and he had to be a facilitator and a scorer and be the primary on ball defender. Like this year, one of the things that has been great was when they added Jaden Zachary, and now he can be much more of a scorer. He doesn't have to there's not as much pressure on him on the perimeter defensively. Like Jaden Zachary was, you could argue for the cohesiveness of the team was a bigger pickup than even Victor Larkin was.
Yeah, he certainly adds a lot to the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah,
he just,
So, but in this year, Chase is Chase is so much more free, and now he's giving you about 18 a night, and he's one of the best 3-point shooters in the ACC and in the country.
I think he's the leader in the ACC, right?
I think he is right now, and he's got to be for he. And what made me mad? He was. I don't think he was selected as a Wooden Award finalist.
Are you serious?
Yeah, like I saw RJ. I think it was the Wooden Award. I don't remember, but I saw RJ Davis and Caleb Love, and I'm like, okay, yeah, this is a name award and not an actual quality play, because Chase Hunter has been the best point guard in the ACC.
Yeah,
for my money.
He's the best shooter in the ACC right now. Like, whatever.
Yeah,
that's dumb.
It is dumb. But shout out to the boys; they're rolling.
Yeah, they're doing really good.
Yeah, and so and my point was, like, they have so much more ways to win than last year's team did. When PJ Hall wasn't scoring, like,
it was that was it.
It made things difficult because I mean, Joe Girard was great, but he wasn't a guy that was going to get his own shot.
Right.
Like, he had to catch off the bounce, off ball, move around, get screens and stuff like that. You have when teams are like Duke was, who were so scared of your 3-point shot, like, you were able to go down low and Victor Locken was giving them
and then you drop like 50 points in the paint on them.
Yeah,
because they're so scared of the 3-point shot.
It just makes them that much more dangerous. And when Chauncey Wiggins is on,
and then you get their big man to foul out.
Yeah. It just it makes a lot. This team, they have a lot more ways to win. I saw a stat that the lineup of Chase Hunter, Dylan Hunter, Jaden Zachary, Victor Locken, and Ian Shefflin, they were the most efficient offensive lineup starting five in the country.
Wow.
I think since January they've been the best in terms of adjusted offensive efficiency, the best starting five in the country. And that reminds Dylan Hunter is another guy that doesn't get enough love. He's quietly been really good.
Consistent.
He's not out here scoring a bunch or anything like that, but he's a great facilitator, great on ball, the perimeter defender. His plus minuses are like insane if you go look at him. Like, when he's on the floor, like, the team is better. They're just flat out better. So that's my long spiel on basketball.
Not that anyone in here cares.
Yeah.
Not that anyone here cares about basketball, but
All right. I think that's going to do it. Just at the 2-hour mark.
Just hit the 2-hour mark. All right, guys. That's going to do it for the All In Show tonight. Thank you guys so much for showing up. Still got 31 people in the chat right now. So if you have not already, please hit that like button on your way out. It would really help us out, and it'd be greatly appreciated. Also, if you're not subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. We're trying to grow the channel and get to 6,000 subscribers. So your help with that would be greatly appreciated. Make sure you guys share the video with all of your college football friends and family, and tell them about the All In Show over here on Clemson at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you guys hanging out for another great episode of the All In Show. And hope you guys have a great rest of the week. Enjoy your President's Day on Monday, holiday. Hopefully some of you have the day off. If not, I'm sorry. Tiggs, this is not a Notre Dame hat. Did you say that? Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the show. We'll see you next Wednesday, 8 p.m. right here on Clemson at the Voice of College Football. Until then, I'm Tiger Paul Craven. He's Jordan Bowman. Good night, guys. Go Tigers.
Later, y'all.